So Joe Biden is the president of the United States, and as he says, that means the buck stops with him on the problems with the Afghanistan pullout. But there is a growing list of people blaming President Trump, including former Trump people. John Avlon with a reality check.
Most Americans seem to like the idea of withdrawing from Afghanistan, but they don't like the way Joe Biden has done it. That's according to News CBS YouGov poll. And that dealt as a political problem for President Biden, given that his administration is predicated upon the promise of competence and compassion. But it's that humanitarian crisis that should really be driving American opinions. As a logistical matter, this has been a disaster. It should be clear now that the benefits of a small residual force rather than a complete abandonment of Bagram Air Base would have been a far better course. But context is key. And the fact that a growing number of Trump administration alumni are speaking out against Trump's capitulation of the Taliban speaks volumes about how we got here.
Our Secretary of State signed a surrender agreement to the Taliban. So this collapse goes back to the capitulation agreement of 2020. I mean, the Taliban didn't defeat us. We defeated ourselves.
A surrender agreement. That's former Trump National Security Advisor and retired Lieutenant General H.R. McMaster slamming the former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo for his negotiations with the Taliban that inexplicably excluded our allied Afghan government. Trump's ex-Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, also weighed in on CNN. While rightfully blaming the Biden administration for the botched withdrawal, he did not spare the ex-president.
President Trump, by continuing to want to withdraw American forces out of Afghanistan, undermined the agreement. I objected that we not reduce below 4,500 troops unless and until conditions were met by the Taliban. Otherwise, we would see a number of things play out, which are unfolding right now.
Which is a reminder that not only was the deal done with the Taliban no good, but that Trump was calling for a complete pullout of U.S. troops by last Christmas, which would have been even more abrupt. Now, one of the areas rightfully inspiring the most grief is the failure to have a streamlined process to save the Afghans who aided our military efforts. And on this front, former Pence aide Olivia Troy fired off a series of tweets accusing Trump advisor Stephen Miller of throwing up roadblocks to stop the immigration of Afghan interpreters and their families. Quote, "There were cabinet meetings about this during the Trump administration where Stephen Miller would peddle his racist hysteria about Iraq and Afghanistan," she tweeted. He and his enablers across government would undermine anyone who worked on solving the SIV issue by devastating the system at DHS and state. Now, Stephen Miller blamed Biden, despite his own clear record of advocating restrictions on immigrants and refugees. Not helped by the fact that articles had long been written about how the Trump administration has dramatically dropped visas for Afghan and Iraqi interpreters. So Trump's attempt to score political points on the Biden administration's failure ring more than a little hollow here. Like when Trump's former UN ambassador Nikki Haley tweeted that to have our generals say that they're depending on diplomacy with the Taliban is an unbelievable scenario. Negotiating with the Taliban is like dealing with the devil. I agree. But Haley's comments would have a lot more credibility if she hadn't vocally backed Taliban negotiations when they were being pushed by her former boss, saying, "The U.S. policy on Afghanistan is working. We're seeing that we're closer to talks with the Taliban in the peace process than we've seen before." Look, from whatever way you look at it, U.S. policy in Afghanistan has not been working. And while the collapse finally occurred on Joe Biden's watch, the policy of abandoning Afghanistan to the Taliban began under Donald Trump. And that's your reality check.
Indeed it is. John Avlon, thank you very much.
I want to bring in Olivia Troy now. She is a former advisor to Vice President Mike Pence, and she has pushed back against this idea that the withdrawal and evacuation operations would have gone smoothly under former President Donald Trump. And in particular, Olivia, you have, as we just heard in John Avlon's reality check there, sort of pulled back the curtain on what went on during the Trump administration as far as getting these folks who are eligible for relief, people who helped U.S. troops, getting them through the system. Tell us a little bit about, you were in meetings about this, and this is something that's personal to you. You did serve as a civilian on and off in Afghanistan. What would Stephen Miller say in these meetings as he argued against relief for these individuals?
Well, it was really hard to hear his statements, and they were said very openly in front of cabinet level people, in front of very senior staff people. And he would say, well, what do you guys want? Do you want a bunch of little Iraqs and stands across the country, across the United States? And it was hurtful to hear that and offensive to many of us in the room who had served on the ground in both countries. I've been to both countries These are the people that helped keep us alive, helped navigate us around the country. And to hear this, naive, hateful rhetoric being said in cabinet level discussions when we're making decisions specifically on items like the refugee ceiling and what was going to happen on that, to hear that kind of rhetoric, we knew what we were up against.
And so what happened when Trump administration officials like yourself were trying to make progress on these immigrant visas and relief for people who had helped the U.S.?
Well, what you would find, this is a very cumbersome, challenging system already. It is very hard for many of these applicants to actually get through the process and actually get their visa issued and be able to be eligible to leave. But what you find is that the resources there, this entire thing was being gutted and under-resourced. And if you look at the numbers on a yearly basis, you'll see that a lower and lower number of people get approved and the visas don't get issued. I remember specifically there was one time where former Vice President Pence was upset at a news story that he had seen on the front page of a newspaper. And so I got the piece of paper on my desk that said, what is going on with this? Why have they been stuck in this process for 2 years? And when you look at the days of these people being stuck in the process, they were stuck for 3 years, and that number increases under the Trump administration. When I called over to the State Department, I found out that there was one person doing the security checks there for thousands of people. And this is, I think, in 2009. And this is a year after there had been a critical decision saying we will prioritize this, regardless of what's happening.
2019, you mean? In 2019?
2019, sorry.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted to double check on that. So look, it's when you talk about some of the things that, the heinous things really that you heard Stephen Miller say in these meetings, they're not that different from what some folks, especially in right-wing media, are saying now about why these people who help the U.S. should not be allowed to come in. They're painting them as invaders. Do you see like a direct link there? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. These are classic talking points that were espoused throughout the entire tenure of the Trump administration. This is anti-immigrant, anti-refugee rhetoric, and it's absolutely disgusting. It's terrible to hear these things said once again when these are people that put their lives on the line, that were there side by side with our military, our civilians, intel officers like myself on the ground, even media and NGOs. This is what happens when you travel to these countries, and you need these people. They need to be your allies. And to send that message to the world and say, we're not going to help these people, starting in the Trump administration, the way they behaved is just deplorable. So I see these narratives surface again, and this is why I found it so upsetting, because I said, yeah, we're in a critical and very, very tough situation on the ground there right now. But let's not forget the context of where a lot of this started, where the crisis was built, and how we dropped the ball on this. These people should have been processed the entire time in the tenure of the Trump administration, especially since he was the one negotiating with the Taliban, which was ludicrous, and planning for this withdrawal. I have no confidence, that they would have gotten any of these people out. And so now we're in the situation where we have thousands of people trying to get out of the country. And it's tough.
Olivia, and look, I know this is personal for you. I know that when these provincial capitals were falling, you weren't just thinking, oh, this is Herat, this is Kandahar. You were thinking of the people, the Afghan people who helped keep you safe when you were there. And I appreciate you telling us, really pulling back the curtain on all of this for us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.